Our next guest, the Honorable Joseph J. DioGuardi, was the first member of Congress to bring the issue of the Albanian rights in the Balkans to the attention of the U.S. government as a new member of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1986. After leaving Congress in 1989, he founded the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation, where he serves as volunteer president. Joe and his wife, Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi, have worked tirelessly to advance the human rights and freedom for Albanians in the Balkans. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Joe DioGuardi. Thank you. Get out of the way.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon. Nice to see a full house here. This is going to be a wonderful trip for you. My role here is minor compared to what you're going to see from Leka and from Fatan and from Agim. But when you look back, when I look back, the word discovery, it's a beautiful word. In three ways I can simplify my role here. One, I get to Congress, poor kid from the Bronx, father had a grocery store. Both parents are from Italy, but my father, believe it or not, spoke Albanian. You might say, well, how could that happen? Well, 550 years ago, the Ottoman Turks overran Albania, and tens of thousands of Albanians only crossed 40 miles from the closest point of Albania. You'll see a map upstairs into Italy. Today, you have 51 Albanian-speaking villages in southern Italy, mainly in the Calabria region. My father's is one of the most famous, called Greci, right near Naples. But there's another discovery that I had. I ran for Congress thinking that I would help save America. Why? I'm a certified public accountant, well-trained in private accounting, in government accounting, and I knew, coming from one of the world's largest firms, having participated in the bailout of New York City with Lazard Frères in 1975, that we had kind of a fraudulent accounting system in the federal government where we don't record all of our debts. And I tried to go there to change that. That was my reason for going to Congress. And people thought I was crazy to run. How are you going to make it? You're never a politician. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. I said, well, I'm going to give it one try. And I just squeaked in a district that was very difficult. But the one discovery was that I was the first certified public accountant ever elected to the U.S. Congress. And today, there's only maybe a few more. You would think more accountants would run. And now you know the problem. Everybody's spending, but nobody's counting. And that's why we have this national debt going up, and most of it is off the books. Because all they're talking about is the cash, not the unfunded liabilities. So why is that important to you? How are we going to be strong for all the people that we want to help in the world if we're not strong ourselves? And that's going to be a big issue in the next 10 years, no matter what your party is. Shirley and I are bipartisan. We represent different interests when it comes to parties, but we get along on almost everything, and certainly on the Albanian issue, human rights, we know what we're speaking about when we go around. This country has become too polarized. Second discovery. My father was alive at the time. He died in 1987. I got to Congress in 1985. My first party as a congressman, Albanians from Kosovo, Yugoslavia, were there. And they overheard him speaking to his younger sister in the language that he brought here in 1929. It's the old Albanian language, which is 90% of the current Albanian language. And they couldn't believe it. They ran up to me. We thought you were Italian American. Well, I am. But your father's speaking Albanian. Well, that, we have some kind of a subculture. I'm not exactly sure. My parents weren't really that well educated. In fact, they had basically no education from southern Italy. I was fortunate to get a good education. And they said, no, you're Albanian, and we need you. They lobbied me day and night. They told me about a place called Kosovo I never heard of. No member of Congress ever heard of it. Only one that knew it was Tom Lantos, a Hungarian Jew saved from the Holocaust by Raoul Wallenberg, because he was born in Hungary. He knew the Albanian people. So that's what started it. The next thing was a trip to Albania that I was encouraged to take by Congressman Lantos because I was a member of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus and Foundation Executive Committee fighting for Soviet Jewry. The issue of apartheid was a big issue back then, and I had a district that had all kinds of people in it. 46 synagogues in my district, by the way, so I had to come up to speed right away on a lot of issues. So the point was that here, Lantos says, Joe, if you ever get a chance to go to Albania, I want to come. And that chance came, and we went there on May 30th, 1990. The place was like North Korea. You couldn't get in, and you couldn't get out. For 45 years, it was its own kind of concentration camp. Many Albanians were killed trying to escape. So when we got there, the communist leader, I'm his leader, didn't want me to bring anybody. But I said I would not come unless I brought a sitting member of Congress. I brought Lantos. In order to ingratiate himself with this great, fine Jewish leader, human rights, you can imagine how far removed Albania was from human rights in those days. He ingratiated Lantos by giving him a file from the communist archives that no one had ever seen, 4 inches thick. Lantos got it, gave it to me. I'm thumbing through it as we're giving one of our speeches, and I'm noticing it, all these clippings, photos, letters, different languages, and it hit me that these were letters from Jews around the world trying to connect to their rescuers. And the communists wouldn't let it happen. They were interested in one thing, their party. They put these letters, clippings, photos in a file. I was the first one to get it. I sent it a week later through my friend Ellie Streit, Wharton School graduate, lives in Israel today, has a second home in Sarasota. Ellie and I have been working for years together building bridges between the Jewish people in America and also the Albanian people. And he brought it to Yad Vashem. They could not believe it, that these people were rescuers that were hidden for 45 years. So this is really what transpired during that time. But what you're going to hear today is another part of that story. And you got to understand how difficult it is for Albanian people, because after World War I, they were artificially divided against their will into 6 different countries, although they live all contiguously. You'll see it on the map upstairs. So if you look at 7 million Albanians, draw a line around them in 6 different countries, that's the original country of Albania that came out of the Ottoman Empire when it collapsed in 1912. Now imagine dealing with political problems, and you have a lot of corruption now in these countries in 6 different places. This is what still befalls the Albanian people, and you can imagine this poor country, one of the poorest in Europe, still has to deal with that, and Shirley and I are trying to help. But how was it that so many Jews ended up in Albania? I never questioned that in the beginning. Now, if you look at the book that's out there right now, Rescue in Albania, you'll see the whole story of Jewish survival and how many of these Jews ended up coming after the burning of the Second Temple and then the Spanish Inquisition. Some were Jewish maidens taken as slaves by the Romans, the ships shipwrecked on the Illyrian, the Albanian coast. Read this book, you'll love it, it's on there. So, how did it happen that where only 200 or 300 families were Albanian Jews, that thousands were in there? Well, this is the story you're going to hear from Leka Reznici and from Aga Malichkai and from Fatan Bislimi. They refused to deal with borders. And the Albanian people, whether in Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, northern Greece, Albania, they are the same people. They have this culture called Besa that comes from 1,000 years ago, the Kanun, that if you're my guest in my house or my country, you'd be saved. And we would have to die before you were injured. When people from Western Europe, I know Ron referred to Balkan Jews, many of these thousands of Jews came from Austria and Hungary, and Germany, but they realized they had to get to Albania. But what did they hit in Yugoslavia? They hit Kosovo. 2 million Albanians in a province in Yugoslavia called Kosovo, and Kosovo was occupied by the Nazis, very toxic. While Albania, in the beginning, before Mussolini was killed, was occupied by the Albanians, by the Italians. They were not so bad until Mussolini was killed, and then the Albanians showed their real courage. Now, this is the story you're going to hear today, and I don't want to go too much further than to say that when I was in Albania, I met with Joseph Yakuel, 1991, on my second trip, because now we had elections to bring a democratic government to Albania. And when I met with him, I found out the first time about this Jewish community. And at that point, they were already planning to go to Israel. And that story will be told by my wife, Shirley Cloyes. But part of that was also his daughter, who I didn't meet at that time, and you'll see from the story. But I wanted to, at least at this point, now turn to her excerpts from the speech she gave for us at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in 2013. And if that can be put on, I want you to hear directly from her. She's the daughter of Yosef Yakuel. She arranged with her father for a couple of hundred Jews to go to Israel. She's in charge of the Israel-Albania Friendship Society, as Leka is the Kosovo-Israel Friendship Society. I want you to see her. She couldn't come here.
You know, you have heard a lot of stories about the saving of the Jews by the Albanian people. But, you know, when I was a teenager, and my father used to tell me those stories, you know what? I was a little bit tired. You know, teenager people. And I used to tell them, what are making a fuss about this? You were an Albanian Jew, and you had good Albanian friends. You spoke Albanian. They saved you. What's the big deal? I saw this as the most natural thing in the world. You know, when I fully realized what happened with the Jews, only when I came in Israel in 1991. When we came in Israel in 1991, and many Jews from Serbia, Macedonia, even from Vienna, they heard that the Jews of Albania they are in Israel. They used to come and talk to us. And I heard such wonderful stories. Each one of these stories is one most beautiful than the other. And of course, I cannot tell you all of them. I'll tell you only one. I met this woman, her name was Mimi Conforti. And she came to me and she said, look, I have to tell you this. I was a small girl. We escaped from Serbia. We did not have documents. We have only forged documents. And the Albanian soldier in the border, he realized that, but he let us come in. And then said, my father, he paid a simple person. He had a donkey. And on the donkey, we put our things and we started a long journey towards the mountains. And we arrived in a remote village, and we found like a hut, yes? And we entered the hut, and there we decided to pass the night. In the middle of the night, we heard somebody knocking on the door. We were terrified. The Germans came. We opened the door, and it was this mountaineer. He didn't say a word. He took a sack of flour. He threw it on the floor, and it disappeared in the evening without telling us our name. He said, this guy, he saved us. And today she told me, I cannot tell who saved us, because all the Albanians, they behave towards us the same way. And today she took my hands and she told me, I can tell you only one thing. All the Albanian people saved us.
Again, let me not hesitate to thank Ron and Karen Retner for all they've done over the years. I've known Ron since I was a congressman. He supported me back in 1984. His father was stepfather was an Orthodox rabbi. That's how we met. And Ron, thanks again for everything. Let me now introduce, and by the way, how did the Jews get to Albania? It was the Albanians of Kosovo that formed like an underground railroad like we had during the Civil War here to get them from house to house to house till they got them where it was relatively safe in Albania.